Most people want to maximize their resources and make wise investments. We track the markets, contribute to 401ks, and build wealth, all in the name of wisdom. But let's be honest, few of us would turn down more money or greater intelligence, but most of us still lack sustained happiness. The common Western mindset often equates more wins and more accrual of materials with more joy. But what if the recipe that most people follow is missing a key ingredient? What if we've been investing in the wrong thing all along? Welcome back to the You Not Me podcast with Chris Bierman. Chris, welcome in today.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the most valuable resource and its wisest investment. The research on this is actually quite clear. The Harvard study of adult development, which began in 1938 and is still ongoing, has tracked people throughout generations to find what really creates lasting fulfillment. Researcher Mark Schultz from Bryn Mawr University summarized it as, money can't buy us happiness, but it gives us security and a sense of control. And the study concludes that the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. Chris, maybe speak to just the common things that people look to for happiness versus the conclusion that this Harvard study has come to.
This was actually a really interesting study. They asked back in 1938, teenagers who were sophomores at Harvard, and half were from the slums and the tenements towns of Boston, so super poor. They asked them, what do they most desire and want in life? And the answers were money, fame. Recently, there was a poll done with millennials, and they asked them the same thing. 80%, the first answer was money. Second answer, fame. And this is something that we all think is, to your point, it gives us security. We think that it's going to take care of everything. I'm the number one example of having that security of money. Thought that I had all these things going on that were great in 2008, 2009 in real estate, and they lost all their value pretty much. So that security that I had was taken away in a heartbeat. And even Jim Carrey talks about it. He says, I wish everybody could be a millionaire so then they could see it's not all that it's cracked up to be. Because you might get to this place where you think that you have enough and that you think that you can take care of yourself, provide for your family, but it can be gone in a heartbeat. And the thing that actually doesn't leave in a heartbeat is relationships. The thing that really, truly provides long-lasting not only joy, but happiness. And then as we'll see, we'll talk about more with this, Harvard study, health, brain function, everything into old age, even just, good marriages. So it's an amazing study. I'm so glad that they've done it and they've kept it going for so long.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things the study hits on most is that we tend to underscore and emphasize everything except that which matters most. We often tend to misplace our metrics, if you will. So I think if we're going to get into some of the things that we tend to track versus the things that we end up missing, obviously we've hit on money, we've hit on fame. I think that even in the modern world, there's this element of notoriety, being seen, the image that you create for yourself, and even being authentic to yourself is kind of like one of the main tenets of the modern person. Maybe get into some of the things that we miss and that we don't track, or even just that we take for granted.
The one thing that we all have the same every single day is we have the same amount of time. But we all have 24 hours in a day. And the question is, how will we use it? A lot of times it's said, where your heart is and what you spend the most time, you are basically showing that that's what you treasure the most. And so is it your job? Is it your finances? Is it your fitness and your health? Is it the way you look? Is it your kids? I mean, kids can become an idol. Like kids can definitely take our focus and our gaze off of, just being truly present. And, again, that can be where we only focus on kids, but not on our spouse anymore. And our kids get all of our attention. Like there are so many things that can be shifted one way or the other. And we don't it's interesting. There are a lot of apps out there that are like trackers, that are like countdown apps. And I remember when the first one came out many, many years ago, I showed it to a friend of mine. I was like, oh, look, I can count down how many days or how many weekends or whatever until my last kid goes to college. And my friend looked at me, he's like, that's kind of really morbid. Like, this is kind of like that's almost like, painful to think about. I'm like, but the thing is if we don't stop and think about this thing, time that we have, very little of, to be honest, how are we going to use it? And there's the old Tim McGraw song, live like you're dying. And it's like, like if I knew the date that I was going to pass from this life to the next, I might live a different way because I might only have 3 weeks instead of, 3 or 30 years. But at the same time, there's this well-roundedness of saying, okay, how can I make sure I have everything in a good balance to where the things that I'm prioritizing the most are really going to have and pay the largest dividends. And again, like what we talk about is it's with relationships, whether it's your spouse, your kids, friends, family, any one of us can work all day, every day, and eventually our hands are empty because there's always more work to do.
Yeah, that's right. People tend to check their portfolios, their 401ks, their savings accounts, but they never really track how many more nights they can play with their kids. Eventually, the kid's going to age out and they're going to hit their teenage years and not want anything to do with you. And then they're out of the house. And it's the same for, how many times can you eat dinner with your parents? A lot of people have aging parents, myself included, and it's not guaranteed that they're, going to live for a lot more years, especially if your parents don't live close to you. I think one of my most beneficial exercises that I've done is just to recognize that, especially when I was living overseas, it's like I was living overseas, maybe see my parents twice a year. And if you add up, just like, all right, well, they're this age, they only have probably somewhere in this amount of years left. That means like, I see them for however many odd number of times left, So, and even then, like how much time do you have left with your spouse? Most people, if they're really, really fortunate, get to their deathbed and their spouse is by their side. That's not the case for everyone. So I think the people who do emphasize the time that they have left with their spouse or with their parents or with their kids or friends or any of these things, obviously, as the study says, they tend to live a more fulfilled life because they've been counting moments instead of just money or fame or whatever it might be. So when they get to the end of their life, they don't feel poor in what matters most.
Yeah, and what was really interesting about that study too is they had people that went up the ladder and then people that came down the ladder as far as, whether they grew up poor in one of the tenements that didn't even have running water. Some of those rose up the ladder and did amazing things. And some of those that were born wealthy and, had this great upbringing slid down the ladder. There were people that were bricklayers, some were doctors, some were factory workers, some were lawyers. There was even one president of the United States that came out of that study. And the thing is your past, it doesn't define you, and your upbringing and where you were born doesn't define what you can do with your life and the impact you can make, because any single one of us has tons of interactions every day. We have the ability, as we talk about, every interaction is an opportunity to create unity. We have abilities all day long, every day around us to actually create relationships. And that's what that study found, is that they could tell by the age of 50, people that had deep, authentic relationships where they, it didn't have to be like 50 people. It could be 2, it could be 5, but it was not the quantity of relationships, it was the quality of the relationships that mattered, that determined in their 80s, they were healthy octogenarians. We're worried about our health and our cholesterol and our fitness and all these other things. And actually, that wasn't the most determining factor in their 50s. The healthiest, fittest people in their 50s weren't the healthiest in their 80s. It was the ones that had the deepest, most authentic relationships, to where they had a spouse or friends that they knew that they were there for them. Even if it was a marriage where there was bickering, but it was one where they knew that that person would never leave them or forsake them. But, conversely, if we don't have good relationships, if we are lonely, that leads to decreased brain function, it leads to decreased physical health. What they also saw is that when, people had hard relationships with their spouse, to where there was no affection shown, or they constantly argued, and it was really a hard, tough marriage, it was very detrimental on their health. And so again, when you truly deeply care about somebody, what often happens is that person starts to do the same in return. And regardless of where your marriage is now, you can change those things. And it may take time, but the thing is there are people that will change. It's just sometimes it takes a long road. And are you willing to be in it for the long haul?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that you mentioned earlier was it's actually a great like riddle if you want to tell a riddle to someone sometime. The one resource that everyone has, but no one controls, what would that be? That would be time. You touched on earlier how, you can always make more money, you can learn more, you can build influence, but you can't add anything to the minutes that are in your life. Talk to me a little bit about why time is the best resource. And then as we kind of get into the next section, you can maybe continue on just into not only why that's the case, but also how to apply that.
I think when you look at time, the biggest thing that we have to understand is like, how do we prioritize what we do? And you almost think about compounding interest, like with your money. Like if you invest a certain amount and over a certain period of time, whether it's 7 years and averaging, 7% or so rate of return, your money doubles. Well, the same thing with what you do in life. When I look at my day, I try to look at, okay, what is the most important thing that I can do the beginning of the day that will have compound interest throughout the day? It'll be working once I get it done versus if I wait, I've missed an opportunity for all that to happen. And it's the same thing with our kids. Spending time with our kids while they're young is unbelievably vital because when they know that they're loved unconditionally, valued, they're secure and cared for, that creates a very, very healthy child throughout their early years, their adolescence, their teenage years. And then if we conversely wait because we're working so much or we're just focused on hobbies or whatever it is, and then we try to come in when they're 16, 17, 18, well, guess what? They have keys to the car. They're out with friends and you don't get nearly as much time as what you did. And so how can you utilize the time that you have and do the most important things that are going to have the biggest return? And when you invest that time in, our time is finite. We only have a set amount of days, hours, minutes, and years in this life. And I think one of the biggest problems is often we just squander our time. If we have something, if we have say it's a natural resource or whatever it is that we hold precious that we know that eventually is running out, we're going to do everything we can to preserve as much as possible, but also to really use it wisely. So often we get caught just scrolling on screens or just binge watching TVs, which is nothing wrong with taking time just to relax and all that. But if it takes up our entire weekend and we get nothing done, and then we have to go straight back to the work week, well, that's a weekend wasted. I know my son, my oldest, is said that he thought about actually leaving his phone at home when he goes to school in the morning and not going back and checking his phone until he gets home at night. And I love the mindset of that in the fact that he doesn't want to be squandering his time because he gets frustrated if he just picks up his phone and just stares at it. He wants to be really intentional with the people around him and spend his time wisely. But there's also that balance of getting messages from your team, your coach, whoever, that maybe there's a change of plans. So it's good to have your phone, but at the same time, it can be hard if you're just wasting precious time that you could be doing something really good in, whether it's planning, thinking, talking with a friend in person. Instead, you just sit on your phone and waste it.
Yeah, that's right. And if we're going to maybe dig into a little bit how people can shift their mindset specifically when it comes to how they use their time, what are some of the practical steps that you would give them if we're going to keep this idea in mind of how time really reveals our heart's greatest priorities and our deepest treasures? What are some suggestions that you would give to people who are looking to shift their mindset in this way?
Again, I think it's taking a look at all the opportunities you have in front of you and what's going to have the largest impact in the long run and what is going to be the longest lasting. There's a book called Die with Zero where it talks about um, instead of saving all of our money up and stockpiling it away because of, old age and retirement and everything else. But what about actually using that now to go on trips and do things that create shared experiences with your friends, with your spouse, with your kids, making sure that you do something with the time that you have, because not only do you have the enjoyment of when you actually did the experience, but then every time you think about it, it's another stack on top of that bar and it keeps getting bigger and bigger to where it's compounding interest. It's the memory of the great time that you had with your friend, with your kids. And so often we waste it on frivolous things that in the long run, it's either just us having the memory or it's something that was done in place of something that could have been much better. And so ultimately, time is our greatest resource, but our greatest investment is in relationships. It's in people that are around us. And when we can make sure that we're looking out and not just looking in and seeing how can we see the need in other people, whether it's struggling because they're going through a trial, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, how can we walk alongside people to make sure that they know how much we truly care about them? But also that is going to give us joy to see that, hey, our purpose and how we were created to be in community and to love other people well, we actually did that. And we truly enjoyed the time we spent with them because you're helping somebody live a good life. And too often we have selfish pursuits that really don't make anyone's life better. It's a waste of time. Again, you can scroll forever, endlessly. There's a reason why it's endless scrolling. There's a reason why Netflix just automatically, when the episode is over, it goes on to the next one because it just wants you to sit there and keep watching it. So too often we're caught in this fantasy world, this lack of reality, and we're watching someone else's story in life that is playing out in front of our eyes, whether it's good, bad, destructive, whatever, and then we're not even affecting our own at all. We're not taking the time and the moments we have to live a good life ourselves, and that's not being alone, that's with people. And how can we find ways to make sure that we're continuously helping other people get better, but also, I think too often we just forget about just the time that we spend on our own, whether it's in prayer, whether it's in reading, and time to recharge, time to grow, and learn, so that we're filling ourselves up, but also then so we can be poured out for other people.
Yeah, there's kind of a vicious cycle that you can get into if you're missing the key ingredient of fulfillment in life. Obviously, ultimately, we know that fulfillment comes from this relationship that we have with Christ. But even if, studies show that even if you're lacking any kind of meaningful relationships with people in general, you're going to lack a lot of contentment. And then obviously, many people don't even know that. Or they hear it and they go, it's not that appealing. It's this other stuff. Then people are chasing status and stuff and screens and all this, and they never find it. Then they're lacking contentment still. And so they go, well, I'm going to look somewhere else, right? And then you get into this really vicious and dangerous cycle of becoming disillusioned and disconnected. And you're chasing something that's really always kind of slipping through your grasp at the last moment. Like right when you think that you have it, it's gone.
So one of the things that we've found is that addictions a lot of times happen is because of a lack of contentment. And so we're trying to find something that gives us, whether it's numbs us to the struggles that we're going through with, and say alcoholism, drugs, etc., or sometimes it's even doing crazy, outrageous sports because we love the dopamine hit. And there was a study utilizing rodents where they actually triggered something to where when they would go up and they would tap on a certain little bar, it would actually trigger a dopamine hit in their brain. And what they found was that stimulus was so powerful, that dopamine hit, that those rodents would go back and they would just keep hitting it incessantly to where they stopped worrying about water and food, and they actually died just because the dopamine hit was so powerful and so strong. And so a lot of times, we do these things that give us these high dopamine hits, but ultimately they're short-lived. They're not long-lasting. And that's where relationships, those are the ones that are long-lasting, is when you have a spouse, a friend, a sibling, a parent that you can walk a long life and go through the hard and the great and the highs and the lows, and making sure that you have someone that you're doing something with. Too often, again, going back to the adult development study, the people that were the most unhealthy and miserable were the people that were lonely. And it doesn't mean that because you're an introvert that you have to go talk to people all the time. But do you have good relationships where you're truly committed to a friend or multiple friends? And it doesn't mean that you have to be just become this extrovert. It just means to make sure that you're finding people that you connect with, that you're living a good life with, and you're spending time with. What we've seen is that people that are ultimately lonely and don't have much social interaction are the ones who eventually, over time, especially once they retire, their cognitive decline is rapidly increased. And so, can you find people to invest in, whether it's looking at different ministries or nonprofits that you want to give your time to? How can you find new hobbies to do with your spouse or with friends to make sure that you're continually putting yourself around other people? Even the blue zones. I mean, they looked at people, that the number of people that actually reached the age of 100 in all these different places around the world. The one thing that was common in every single place that the blue zone studied was deep quality relationships.
Yeah, and I think that if you're someone who kind of feels like, you're bottoming out at the moment, you're not alone. I think that both of us have been there before. And the hard truth, and maybe the difficult thing to swallow, is that when you bottom out, that's really when like a new journey can begin. That's really where the you not me mindset began for you, Chris, is you bottomed out in life and then realized that fulfillment and what matters most didn't come from any control or accumulation or anything like that, but it was much more about connection. And so hopefully for listeners out there, if you feel lonely or you feel disconnected, first of all, reach out to us because we'd love to connect with you. But second of all, the hope for us is that you'll realize that you'll find meaning not from what you gain, but by how you give to other people, and that you'll understand that fulfillment in life is not going to come by how many assets you control, but by how deeply you connect.
And I saw this personally with my own father. My dad passed away during COVID from COVID. He was in the hospital recovering from a surgery, and he was in assisted living, and someone came in that worked there and brought COVID in. And he eventually passed from that. But I was able to see him while he was in the hospital before this really all happened. My dad was 6'2", 225, played rugby till he was 40. He was this big beast of a man. And he could always get through everything with his physicality, his good looks, his charm, everything. But then, unfortunately, when this surgery happened and he had lost basically really much strength and control of his arms and legs, and he was bedbound, is when it all hit. And he realized he couldn't do it on his own. And I think the hardest thing for most of us is to truly be vulnerable and to say, I can't do this. I need help. And I remember it was the last time I ever saw my dad in person, because you couldn't get in to see people during COVID in the hospitals. I remember he just had this conversation with me. I've been talking to him about just our relationship. I've been talking to him about faith, all these things for years. And it all culminated at this one time in the hospital. And it was the last time I ever saw him. And he just broke down and he said, I'm so sorry. He said, nobody ever taught me how to do this. I tried to do my own. I did, I know I did it the wrong way. I could have done it better. And I said, Dad, it's okay. I said, I love you. I've always loved you. And I want nothing more than for you to just to be filled with joy and to not have this weight and burden of trying to carry and do everything on your own. Like, I've always been here for you. I want to help you. And I just remember he just asked for my forgiveness, and he changed. And not that he was a bad person, but the relationship was stifled because he was hiding things. He didn't want to talk about things that were going on, and he was very closed off. And the lightheartedness that he said he felt after talking to me and asking for forgiveness, and then just, us praying together and walking through just the past and the future that unfortunately didn't last very long. He died about a month later, but it's never too late to change. And you should never give up on anyone, because you never know when that moment is. And as you said, sometimes it's at your lowest. Oftentimes it's at your lowest because we think we can do it. We think we can handle this burden ourselves. And the problem is eventually you're going to see there's something you can't handle and that you need the help of another. And that's where ultimately, I mean, for us, we want to point you to Christ and in the relationship with him, but he also calls us to be in horizontal relationships with people around us. I mean, that's why we need to be in community. We need to be reminded of what matters most. We need to be walked alongside when the trials come, but then also have someone to celebrate with us when the highs come. And that's why we say, if you don't have somebody, reach out to us. We just want you to know that you are valuable, you're loved, and just come as you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. The point is that you need to be in relationship. And if you don't, it's not going to be the life that you could truly have that's filled with joy and one that you live your life and you don't have regrets.
That's right. All of us have time. None of us know how much. And so the challenge from today is, while you have time, choose to shift your mindset to what matters most. Some reflection questions for listeners who have made it this far, you can maybe ask this week is, where are you investing your best hours of the day? When you have the most energy, when you're most alert, where is that time going to? Secondly, who's getting the leftovers of your attention? Obviously, you have only so many hours of the day, you have so many obligations, but is there someone that's very close to you who's getting leftovers, who should maybe be getting the main course? And then last, what conversations are you postponing because you think there will be more time? And Chris just gave an amazing example and testimony from his own life of a life-changing conversation that he had with his dad, even if, that was only a month left of his dad's life. But I think that Chris and his dad would both say that conversation completely changed the course and changed the outcome of a person, even if it was a very short time. So a lot of us often think that we can just punt things down the line, and then there's plenty of people that think that every day, and then the next day they might not wake up. So while we have time, what conversations do you need to have today? So just to conclude, time is your best resource. Relationship is its best investment. If you steward both wisely, you'll discover a kind of wealth that never runs out, even into eternity. Thanks for the time today, Chris.
Thank you.